who's there behind the scenes, and anyone at Governors State Uni who's helped with this, and also want to thank the people providing the BHWET grant that has also made this possible. Very grateful to one and all, and of course grateful that on your Friday evening, those of you who are attending after whatever sort of day you've had, so good that you're here. I love REBT. I love it passionately for very many reasons. And one of them is it's not only an effective scientific evidence-based approach, the pioneering cognitive approach that heralded in the cognitive revolution in psychotherapy, but it's also a way of life for those of us who choose to adopt it as such. And in recent times, I don't know if anyone here has felt unaffected one way or another about the COVID situation and any other situations that affected your lives in any dramatic ways. Last year, and certainly in the early part of January in the United States, the political unrest was dramatic, and a number of people found themselves feeling very, very stressed. And research has shown, and it's not surprising, that since COVID, there are significant increases in the number of people who are seeking therapy. I suppose it's good that people who are suffering are seeking therapy, but the sad thing is it indicates the increase in the number of people who are feeling intense anxiety and or depression or some other debilitating emotion and are having a hard time dealing with what's going on. And, you know, the title of tonight's seminar, I'll read it, even though I created the title, it is rather long. The Catastrophizing Cure, the compassionate and empowering pioneering cognitive approach of rational emotive behavior therapy. And catastrophizing is a word among others that my late husband, who Dr. Dermer mentioned, the late great Albert Ellis. So that's the word he created, catastrophizing, along with awfulizing, meaning the worst that it possibly could be. So when people are catastrophizing and awfulizing, that's what they're thinking, that's what they're believing, that it just couldn't be worse. And if we pause and think about things, if one is alive and able to think clearly enough, one is not cognitively impaired nor suffering from debilitating physical illness, then where there's life, there is hope. And the evidence is abundant. So many people, some still alive, others who have passed, but some were famous, others you may have known in your personal lives. People who coped with horrendous situations and refused to succumb to hopelessness and carried on, probably armed with a healthy attitude. They may not have known of REBT officially, but they were applying its principles, or some of them, and emerged from hellish periods, not only victorious, but creating meaningful and amazing lives. So, among other things, I'm going to talk about the fact that REBT reminds us, as the Stoics said, it's not circumstances that create our emotional responses, but what we tell ourselves about them, what we're thinking, what we believe. That's what creates our emotional experience. And I think one of the tragedies of human life is that so few people are aware that it's not circumstances or events that's creating their emotions. So many people are not aware that they create their own emotions, and they don't know how to create healthy ones to replace the unhealthy ones. And therein another of the many gifts that REBT offers, the how-tos. And so the general plan for our time together this evening is as follows. In a few moments, I will describe the basic principles of rational emotive behavior therapy, and that will include distinguishing between rational and irrational thinking, distinguishing between the healthy and unhealthy negative emotions, going over one of the main frameworks that Albert Ellis created, the ABCDE of REBT, which is an amazingly effective self-help tool and tool to offer to clients. And I will also be highlighting some of the beliefs that create catastrophizing, anxiety, depression, and other unhealthy emotions at this time, and of course talking about what we might do about it. If there's a volunteer, I would like to give a live demonstration, not a role play, a live demonstration of REBT, of course, somewhat of a quickie. It won't be like a whole therapy session, but it will give particularly those people who are not familiar with the REBT an experience of REBT in action. Then a brief discussion or description of tools and techniques, or some of them in REBT. Some of the pivotal aspects of REBT psychotherapy will be described, along with mentioning unique qualities of REBT. If there's time, I'd like to say a few words about the history and development of REBT, but since we only have 2 hours, I'll have to be selective. Dr. Dermer mentioned that you are welcome to send in questions. Please do via the chat, and I'll do my best at the end to answer as many of them as there is time for. So that's the general plan for this evening. Just to finish off that introduction, one of the reasons, in addition to the fact that REBT is such an empowering and powerful psychotherapeutic approach, and that it is such a practical and compassionate philosophy of life that people may choose to live by, or to use some of the principles in their daily life. But I love the fact that for those of us who do either or both of the above, then we can act as models for other people who may be catastrophizing, even if they're not our clients or patients, even if they're not coming to us for therapy, even if they're friends or relatives or partners or neighbors or people on the street. There's something about the authentic stability that a person who is choosing to create healthy emotions exudes. And consciously and subconsciously, you know, that can have a strong healing and soothing impact on other people, especially during a time like this COVID period. And as REBT reminds us, and by the way, I will also mention briefly here Adlerian psychotherapy. I know a number of you embrace that as well. I'm a member, happily and proudly, of the North American Society of Adlerian Psychotherapy, and so is my husband, so is Albert Ellis. And he acknowledged that the work of Alfred Adler, parts of it certainly, did influence him in his creation of REBT. So gratitude to Alfred Adler, along with other influences on Albert Ellis in his creation of REBT. So both Adlerian philosophy and REBT philosophy encourage social interest and helping others. And by helping others, it not only helps others, but it's a healing balm for our individual spirits, for us individually. And Dr. Dermer mentioned that since my husband's passing, which was in, I can't believe it's so long ago, doesn't seem like it, 2007, and he's entrusting me to continue his work. And a few of the things that I'm emphasizing strongly that he certainly agreed with, but may not have emphasized as much. The first one is the power of gratitude, the importance of daily gratitude. And research has demonstrated, medical, scientific research, and one of my dearest friends, I'm not sure if she's present, she was thinking about being present tonight, who's a brilliant cardiologist here in New York City, shared with me a couple of years ago an article in JAMA, the Journal of the American Medical Association, that demonstrated that people who practice daily gratitude it has a significant impact on the well-being or the health of the cardiovascular system. Most of the article I didn't understand because there were statistics and very long words, with chemicals and all, but I did understand the conclusion. And so I certainly, when I'm working with, now I know some of you who are therapists call the people you work with patients, and some of you call them clients. So interchange clients, patients, clients. Daily gratitude is a homework activity that I recommend to practically all, if not all, the people I work with, and something I practice in my daily life, and it makes a great difference. Okay. I just mentioning to Michelle and Shannon that I know you're recording this, and I'm seeing mainly a black screen with just a few little smaller screens with a few faces. Is that okay? Is the recording still happening? I just wanted to check.
Yes, it's okay. What's going to happen is we will see your face as the speaker. So it'll always come up as the speaker view on the recording. So don't worry. And if it's more comfortable for you at the top right-hand side of the screen, you'll see a little teeny box that says view, and you can change it there for yourself so that it looks like speaker view, whatever's comfortable for you.
I'm comfortable. I just was concerned because my screen is black, and that it sounds like we're on track. Thank you, Michelle. Okay, without further ado, let's consider the basic principles of rational emotive behavior therapy, the effective, pioneering, no-nonsense, scientific, evidence-based, compassionate psychotherapeutic approach. Now, I'm not going to go into the history and development of it now. I mentioned if there's time, I'll talk about it at the end of our time this evening. However, I will mention just the historical integrity, and because sadly, a number of younger students of psychology and counseling who I meet do not realize that REBT preceded the very well-known cognitive behavior therapy by 15 years. REBT first came out in the late 1950s, and Aaron Beck's marvelous CBT, first known as cognitive therapy, CT, first came out, his work on depression in the late 1960s. And Albert Ellis was a mentor in many ways to Aaron Beck. He used to often Beck used to acknowledge the influence and help of Albert Ellis. And in Al's, by the way, when I say Al or Al's, I'm talking about Dr. Albert Ellis. I was married to him, and so I'm used to calling him Al. So that's who I'm talking about, not Alfred Adler or Albert Einstein, but Albert Ellis. And so in Al's autobiography, there are a number of letters, correspondence between Beck and Ellis. And I think it's important for us to know that, because there's something to be said for accuracy in sharing history. And when I meet students who tell me, I don't know if I've heard of Albert Ellis or REBT, yeah, didn't that come after CBT? I feel it's quite sad. The fact of the matter is, many of CBT's offerings are based on the principles of REBT. And there are certain elements in REBT that are not emphasized in CBT. So it's not a competition. I'm not saying people should study REBT, not at all. But it's important that people know that both exist and know the unique offerings in both. REBT emphasizes the benefit of a person considering their philosophy of life and living and what their core beliefs are in terms of that. When we're disputing irrational beliefs, or CBT might call them cognitive distortions. So there are a number of unique elements to REBT that people benefit from knowing. So having said that, the basics of REBT, the basic principles, the first one I already mentioned some minutes ago. It's not an event. It's not what happens that creates our emotional response or reaction. No one can make you feel angry. Circumstances don't make us anxious. REBT asserts it's what we tell ourselves about them, the circumstances, that create our emotional reactions, responses. The next element of REBT is that when we think in rational ways in response to adversity, in response to a difficult or challenging situation, having things happen that we didn't want or expect, or not getting something that we really did have our hearts set on. Now, when we think in healthy, rational ways, we create what REBT calls healthy negative emotions. And when we think in unhealthy, irrational ways about the same adversity or activating events, then we create unhealthy negative emotions. One of the unique offerings of REBT, and other approaches that are followed may be adopting this as well, but it really started with REBT. And what that is it doesn't bundle the unpleasant or negative emotions into one basket and the positive, happy, pleasant ones in another. REBT certainly distinguishes between the happier, the more pleasant, positive ones and the negative, but REBT distinguishes between the healthy negative emotions and the unhealthy negative emotions. Negative in this context does not mean in any way bad, but not pleasant. So REBT, I mean, think about it. REBT, there's more emphasis on the emotions or emotion education in REBT than in some or many, if not most, of the other cognitive approaches. Though again, as things are evolving over time, some newer cognitive approaches are incorporating elements of REBT. Very few, but a few give credit to Albert Ellis for his influence, and quite a few don't. Oh, well, that's the way it goes. So anyway, REBT discerns between the unhealthy negative emotions which are debilitating and include depression, hopelessness, despondency, anxiety, extreme fear, panic, rage, shame, and guilt. When we think in healthy, rational ways about the same challenging situations, then the healthy negative emotions that we are likely to create include concern instead of anxiety, extreme fear, and panic. Concern is healthy. It can motivate us to take some hopefully productive action. Anxiety, panic, fear can very often debilitate or cause a person to procrastinate or avoid, and certainly it's harmful for our physical health and well-being. I don't have time this evening to go into the indubitable mind-body emotion connection. When I say body, I mean the physical health of the body, but there is abundant scientific research demonstrating the connection between our emotions, our thinking, and our physical well-being and health. So concern is motivating. You know, if you're a student, oh, I've only got 3 days before my paper's due, I better do it. The adrenaline is flowing, but one is not necessarily inhibited. It's more likely to be motivated. Whereas with anxiety and panic, the student may look for excuses or avoid or do a lousy job because the mind is not adequately focused on the task at hand. Okay, continuing the healthy negative emotions. When we think in rational ways, we create healthy grief and sadness and disappointment instead of hopelessness, despondency, and depression. You know, hopelessness and despondency are often present when people attempt and sometimes succeed in suicide. There's just no hope. Whereas grief and sadness and disappointment are healthy. They're not pleasant like joy and happiness, but they're enriching. They're part of the privilege of being a human being who can feel emotion. Grief after we've lost someone who we loved. Sure, in the early stages, it can be raw and painful, but as time goes on, it's that energy and emotion that's married to the love of the person or people we're deprived of. You know, I could say when I think of my parents or my husband and other people who have passed away, who I still miss, it's a form of grief. I am deprived, you know, without their presence in my life, their physical presence. You know? But it's enriching. It brings forth the experience and memory of my love of them. So grief isn't bad. Now, again, the benefit of emotional education or motion education. Some people mistake depression for grief. So, you know, if months and years have gone by and a person doesn't want to get out of bed and they attribute to, I don't want to live without that person since they've died, my life has no meaning, that's probably depression. And it may be partly endogenous, biological, as well as contributed to by their attitudes and thinking. Whereas again, the experience of sadness and grief. They're healthy, they're nourishing. And disappointment, disappointment like concern can be motivating. Let's say someone is disappointed, they lost their job, they didn't do that well in their studies and so on. And if they were apathetic or didn't feel anything, they might not make effort to try something different or try it again. So disappointment is also healthy. REBT is not about creating some neutral emotional zone in life, some just go with the flow, it's all okay, whatever. REBT invites us to experience at times intense emotion, but intense, or it doesn't always have to be intense, that would be a bit hard to maintain, but deep emotion as often as is appropriate. And that's different times for different people to feel intensely, but intense, healthy emotions. And the choice is ours. REBT again reminds us it's not our circumstance. We have a choice when we know we have a choice in how involved we want to get in our lives and in empowering ourselves to create an emotional experience on our journey through circumstances and chapters in life that's enriching, not always happy, but at times passionate, intense, and it's part of being human, that privilege of feeling emotions. Not that other animals or creatures don't feel emotions, they certainly do, but that's not what I'm talking about tonight. Okay, continuing on describing the healthy negative emotions. When we think in healthy ways, we create what's called healthy anger instead of unhealthy rage. With rage, it's reacting. We often do, or a person who is enraged may do more harm than good, rarely, if ever, any good. So what, according to REBT, is healthy anger? REBT is humanistic to the core. And there is a premise that if a person is not cognitively impaired, is not emotionally and mentally disturbed, then there's an inclination to do good, not harm. There's a choice to behave from one's moral compass, which tends to act against unethical, immoral behavior, brutal behavior either to oneself, to the individual, or that one witnesses being carried out against other individuals or groups or religions or countries or political parties or whatever. So according to REBT, healthy anger is that energy that is connected to our moral compass that comes up if we receive or witness immoral, unethical, brutal behavior that says, but we are not impelled to react whenever possible. And it's not always possible. Sometimes it's a situation and quick action is needed, but it's not always that way. And so when possible, a person experiencing healthy anger reflects what might be the most productive, effective, best thing to do right now. Run for the hills, call 911, try to communicate with this person, run around the block, meditate, do some yoga. There's a choice when possible to consider whatever action one takes. And sometimes the choice is no action right now. So I hope that is a clear enough explanation of healthy anger versus unhealthy rage. When we think in healthy, rational ways, then instead of debilitating guilt and shame, which also are often present in people who attempt suicide, we experience regret. Now, regret is another emotion that is connected to the healthy, rational thoughts that we think that are fueled by our moral compass. We are willing, if we've done a bad thing, as the fallible humans that we are, if we've failed at something, made a mistake, even acted in atrocious ways, we are willing to own that we're fallible humans that did badly, but we do not judge ourselves as bad. REBT reminds us that every human is fallible, and we are not what we do. We are not, our worth is not defined by what we do. We may act in evil ways. Some people have acted in evil ways, but in all probability, they're not 100% evil, meaning that they would only ever do evil things. They may do 97% of evil actions, but in all probability, they may do some actions that are not evil, and vice versa. You know, even people who predominantly act in good ways, in benevolent ways, in saintly ways, in all probability, sometimes have screwed up, made mistakes, or done something that was not all that good. And so REBT, which was influenced by general semantics, and those of you who want to read more about that, Alfred Korzybski was the father of general semantics, and that reminds us that we are not what we do. What we do doesn't define us. We are responsible for what we think and how we act when we know that we are, but it doesn't define our worth. So regret is helpful because it gives us the opportunity to prevent ourselves from doing it again, doing mistake or a bad deed again. It helps us forgive other people who have acted badly. Not necessarily forgive their bad actions, but not harbor hatred or bitterness within ourselves. It's a choice, and it can take effort, but it's effort worth it, well worth it. So regret is the healthy negative emotion that we experience when we think in rational ways, rather than guilt and shame, which we create when we think in irrational ways. Okay, let's move on now to hearing about, or I will share with you, the difference between irrational beliefs that create those unhealthy negative emotions and rational beliefs that create the healthy negative emotions. Here we go. When we think in irrational ways, let's start with that, then we have demands and shoulds and oughts and musts. It's rigid thinking, it's inflexible thinking. And my husband, in his brilliance, was able to identify 3 core irrational beliefs from which countless others develop. And the first one, and please, as I share this with you, consider which, if any, that you might believe. The first one is, you, the individual, I must do well and be liked or loved or approved of by everyone. If any of you have a hard time being criticized, I'm not saying it's pleasant to be negatively criticized, but if you feel either enraged or depressed or anxious, it's likely that you might need approval in order to feel okay. So shoulds and musts and oughts. The first of the three, as I was starting to say, I must do well, breeds perfectionism, and be loved, liked, approved by everyone. Second one is you, and you might be an individual, a small group, a large group, a group following a certain religion or political party, or it could be a country, or you must act, must be, must behave the way I think you should. You must believe what I believe. You, if it's particularly towards an individual, you must treat me well and act the way I think you should. You know, that second belief is at the heart of terrorism and hatred and wars, demanding that people who act differently be the way you are, the way you think they should be. And the third core irrational belief is life should be fair and with justice. Life should be fair and just. Now, as you'll hear me say in a few minutes, it's very healthy to want that. It's healthy to prefer that and work towards it. But when we think in rigid ways, we're saying it should be that way. And where does it get us? To think something should be a certain way when in that particular moment, it's not. So, demands, shoulds, musts, oughts. Another element of irrational thinking is, as I mentioned earlier, my husband created these words: catastrophizing, awfulizing, thinking that it's the worst that it could be, blowing things out of perspective, taking things way too seriously. Now, that's not to say that some things aren't extremely serious, but people who are in the habit of thinking in irrational ways tend to exaggerate even situations that aren't in reality all that serious objectively, and can blow them out of proportion and make themselves unnecessarily miserable. There's an absence of humor, an unwillingness to look for the funny side of some things when we're thinking in irrational ways. There's absolutistic thinking, you always or I'll never, stereotyping, overgeneralizing. There's what's called low frustration tolerance. I must have what I want when I want it, little baby that I am. And finally, in my describing the main elements of irrational beliefs which create the unhealthy negative emotions, there's damnation of oneself and or others and or life in general when things don't go the way we think they should. So they're the main elements of irrational thinking. When we think in rational ways, it creates the healthy negative emotions. It's the opposite of that. We have preferences, we have wants, we have desires. It's very healthy in life to have goals. But see, REBT reminds us that if one wants something, even passionately and dearly, and one doesn't get it, one is likely to feel healthily sad and disappointed, maybe some grief. But as I described earlier, they're not debilitating and can be enriching and quite motivating. If one is shoulding, then one is likely to create either hopelessness or enragement or anxiety. Continuing to describe the elements of rational thinking. We have a sense of humor when appropriate, whenever possible. We do our best to have a realistic, objective perspective. We don't think in absolutistic ways. We don't stereotype or make an effort not to. We don't overgeneralize. We make an effort not to catastrophize or awfulize. We have what's called high frustration tolerance. We remind ourselves we can stand what we don't like. We just don't like it. And as I touched on earlier, one of the things that REBT emphasizes more than any other cognitive approach that I know of, there is acceptance commitment theory, but in some ways it's similar, some ways it's different, and it certainly was influenced by REBT. Anyway, what REBT emphasizes is the importance of unconditional self-acceptance, where we make the effort to create and maintain that experience, that knowing that I have worth simply because I exist. Just like other things in nature that don't need to be perfect, and yet, a kind of a tree that might have initials carved in it. It's not perfect, but it's a valuable part of our natural world, and each individual, REBT asserts, has worth as a living biological, chemical, mindful hunker energy. That's an interesting description. I don't think I've even heard myself describe people like that. Anyway, I'll go with my flow. Yes, I may do some good things. I hope I do more good than bad. And as a fallible human, I may do things I severely regret. But that doesn't make me bad. And all the good things don't make me good. They make me a person of worth who does good and or bad things. The second of three forms of unconditional acceptance that REBT emphasizes is unconditional other acceptance, where I make the choice, and this has been controversial, and some people have questioned how realistic it is to emphasize this. What am I talking about? Unconditional other acceptance, where we make the choice and effort to not accept brutal behaviors, and yes, where possible, seek just consequences. Where possible, it's not always possible, often it is, but that we're willing to unconditionally accept the worth of that human being. That's a very tough one for people who have been treated in brutal ways or loved ones have been murdered. I understand. And people have said, how can you expect that? Well, I have a few answers. Again, I remind you, unconditional other acceptance doesn't mean you like the person. It doesn't mean you love the person. And it certainly invites one to not accept bad behavior and to do what one can to change it, and again, to seek consequences where appropriate. However, each one of us in our finite life have a choice, if we know we have a choice, about the emotions that we create and what we feel. And when we know we have a choice, we can choose to maintain hatred and bitterness, or work on having forgiveness and compassion for people whose actions we may despise. And people rightly often ask, well, how do you do this? Again, it's a choice, but one of the ways that has proven successful for many is to consider that if any one of us had the evildoer's brain chemistry, genetic makeup, had been brought up the way they had, indoctrinated with ideas they were indoctrinated with, perhaps gone through experiences in puberty or adolescence, teen years, young adulthood, where they didn't feel any worth and may have joined a group that encouraged certain evil behaviors, and that made them feel worthwhile because they didn't know any other ways. And if any one of us had been thinking what they had been thinking, if we had their brain chemistry and background and so forth, and had been thinking what they were thinking the moment they did the evil act, are we willing to admit that we might have done the same or similar thing? It doesn't excuse it, but it can allow us not to waste energy on hatred, and at best work towards forgiveness and compassion. Not everyone chooses to do that, but some people have and succeeded and enjoy the fruits of that. I often think of the example, and I think of many examples, but one that comes to mind is a few years ago when a disturbed individual, again, I remind you the premise in REBT that unless a person is disturbed, not connected to a moral compass, they're not likely to act in extreme and evil ways. And so a disturbed young man joined a Bible group in a church in North Carolina a few years ago, and afterwards he shot the preacher, the pastor, and people in the congregation or in the Bible group. And I remember being inspired to tears watching the news that evening, and relatives of people who had been murdered by him said, we choose to forgive him. He's a disturbed young man. It is a choice. It's easier for some than with others. But if it's a choice we make, we are likely through ongoing effort to create more and more of it and to maintain it. But it requires ongoing thinking about our thinking and recognizing when we're disturbing ourselves with irrational beliefs, disputing them, which I'm going to say more about in a few moments, and coming up with healthy, not Pollyanna, not unrealistic, positive, sickly sweet kind of platitudes, it's all for the best. Some things may not in the short term seem or be all for the best. But if we're still alive and not severely injured or damaged, human resilience is a remarkable thing, and we can stand brutal situations. And again, there are many people who've survived wars and shocking situations and have chosen not to forget about their brutal past, but to focus even more in the here and now with gratitude on what is good and the fact that they have survived and are not just survivors, but can think of themselves, if they so choose, as victorious ones who are making effort to live very meaningful lives. And what's meaningful, that's different to each individual. Okay, so that's unconditional other acceptance. And it can take effort, but it's worth it. And the final element of unconditional acceptance that REBT emphasizes the benefit of is unconditional life acceptance, where again, we don't put our head in the sand about things in our world, in our country, in our life that are very, very bad, but we refuse to only or predominantly focus on them. In addition to accepting reality and, if possible, doing something to make things better, sometimes it's very possible, sometimes it's not, and then the wisdom of accepting what we can't change, the wisdom of knowing the difference between that and what we can change. But refusing just to see, like if you have a fruit bowl and there's one rotten apple and other fruit are beautiful, and just to focus on the rotten apple, but to be willing, oh yeah, that's there, but so's that. So unconditional life acceptance. Okay, so I hope I've described clearly for you the difference between rational and irrational thinking and healthy and unhealthy negative emotions. Now, another beautiful offering that I touched on earlier of REBT is the simple, elegant, yet so effective tool of the ABCDE of REBT, a self-help tool where a person can identify the unhealthy emotion that they want to change, then take time to do detective work and identify as many irrational beliefs as possible that they have been thinking in relation to the activating event, then to be willing to thoroughly dispute each and every one of those irrational beliefs and come up with a healthy, new, effective, rational belief instead of each of the irrational ones. And so one of the handouts available to you tonight is headed the REBT self-help sheet. If you don't already have it, I'm sure that Michelle can provide it to you at some point. And so you'll see on the self-help sheet that it invites a person, so you can use it as a tool, offer it to clients, patients, students. An initial point might be registering that, oh boy, this is not a healthy emotion and I choose to change it. That's the starting point. So then one first writes down after that the activating event, what seems to have created the unhealthy emotion. I underline seems because I remind you it's not what happens that creates the emotion, but that in between stage of what we tell ourselves. So what happened? And just describe it very objectively, like what would a camera see? Don't flourish or romanticize or catastrophize. This is what happened. He abused my trust. You know, she told me blah, 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 whatever happened. And then one actually goes to the C, which stands for consequences. And there can be two forms of consequence or consequences. And I'm going to focus primarily on the emotional consequences, but an REBT therapist will also work on any behavioral consequences that are unhealthy that a patient or client might want to change. For example, someone you've worked with or you are working with may have stopped smoking and then they've started again and they want to stop that unhealthy behavior, and it's connected to perhaps the anxiety, you know, or they've started drinking for them too much and they want to stop that, or overeating, or whatever the unhealthy behavior is. REBT can certainly help a client, patient work on changing that. But I'm going to, in the time we've got, just stick to looking at changing the unhealthy negative emotions. So we write down the C, the unhealthy negative consequence, and then we get to the B. We identify as many irrational beliefs that we thought, or, you know, sometimes I ask someone, what were you thinking? And their first response is, oh, I wasn't thinking anything. Well, maybe not consciously, but in all probability, there are some subconscious attitudes that came into play. So if not what you remember you were thinking, what might you have been thinking that was irrational, that created whatever the unhealthy emotion you've noted is that you want to change? So, as you'll see on your handout, as I described earlier, you look for the shoulds, the musts, the oughts, the demands, the catastrophizing, awfulizing, low frustration tolerance, absolutistic thinking, and damning oneself or others or life itself, as many as you can. And then one goes to the D, as you'll see if you've got the handout. I'm looking at what you've got or will have if you haven't got it yet. And we dispute. You see, REBT, unlike some other cognitive approaches, doesn't just encourage a person to identify the unhealthy belief and replace it with a healthy belief. Ultimately, of course, that's what we want in REBT, but the precision. REBT suggests that we first dispute each irrational belief so that it loses credibility, so we no longer believe it, in which case we're unlikely to, or much less likely to create the unhealthy negative emotion in a similar or other circumstance. And REBT encourages us to dispute, and this is in your handout, in realistic ways, in logical ways, in pragmatic ways, in Socratic ways. So ask of each irrational belief the question, where is it getting me to believe this? Is it helping me or hurting me? Where is the evidence? Can I really not stand it? Is this belief even logical? Is it realistic? Does it follow from my preferences that just because I prefer something means it should be so? So we question each irrational belief, and implicit in the response to the disputing will come the E, the effective new beliefs, the effective new philosophies. And I encourage people I work with to write them down. I can stand what I don't like. I just don't like it. Even when I fail at something, I am not a failure. I have worth. So of course we tailor them if we're working with a patient or a client, and if we're doing self-help, you'd have specifics in relation to the original circumstance, but I'm speaking in general terms now. So you come up with a healthy new beliefs, E, effective new beliefs or effective new philosophies. And then what REBT reminds us is that that's not enough. An epiphany, oh, right, this is the way to think about it. That's not enough. It's a good start. But REBT teaches us, as does neuroplasticity, that to create and maintain healthy new beliefs, healthy new habits of practically any nature requires ongoing work and practice and repetition for at least 30 days. And so Albert Ellis, in his wisdom back in the 1950s, was telling his patients, then what people call clients now, they were patients, to do homework. He became active directive, do homework for 30 days. And research now shows, he was a visionary. He just had a knowing. There was no research done then to support his suggestion. But now we have ample evidence-based material supporting the efficacy of repetition for at least 30 days. And so one could repeat many times a day for 30 days the effective new beliefs, or do an ABCDE every day for 30 days, or do one or some of other tools and techniques that I will touch on briefly because I don't have that much time tonight to go into detail about everything. But active, taking action. It's not enough just to know, that's important. It's not enough even just to take action, but it's also important to be mindful of our emotions and just take stock. Are they healthy or unhealthy? And do I choose to make the effort to change the unhealthy ones in this one life I've got? Okay, so just looking, when I look down, I'm just checking some notes. I don't want to leave out any of the main principles that I intended to share with you tonight. So early on in my talking with you all tonight, we're looking at catastrophizing and the fact that during this COVID period, many people who were fairly emotionally stable before COVID are experiencing anxiety or greater anxiety, depression, and are doing a whole lot of catastrophizing. And so some of the irrational beliefs that are contributing to a lot of people in the here and now experiencing and creating and experiencing greater anxiety, distress, upset, rage, confusion. And as I read these, again, I invite you to consider, do you or people you know firmly believe any of these? And if you do, I invite you to contemplate, it's hurting you, it's not helping you, and it's not being realistic. They include, I must always know the truth and facts, and it's terrible if I don't. I must know if the vaccines are safe. I can't stand it if I don't know for sure. I must know what to believe all the time. I can't stand it. Can you hear the I can't standitis? I can't stand it when people lie, either for personal gain or political motives or unethical reasons. People should never behave in those ways. I must have certainty and know when this pandemic will end and when there's going to be an absolutely safe 100% vaccine for all children and elderly and all of us in between. And I must know when I can comfortably socialize again. I can't stand this isolation. I can't stand wearing masks. There's never been a time as bad as this, and it may never end. I don't know. This is a tough one. I don't know who I am anymore. What is happening is utterly terrifying and terrible for me. So we really benefit from identifying specifically what our beliefs might be and use our minds, our ability to think in rational ways, to dispute and replace such ideas. And it's really important to identify and target any pessimism we're harboring, any blowing things out of perspective, need. It's okay to want certainty, but to need it is harmful, because is it possible to have absolute certainty after all? So in addition to the catastrophizing and the need for certainty, this presence of low frustration tolerance is doing a lot of people in, as well as damning life and other people and ourselves. So that's my introduction to REBT. And before I talk about any other things, I'd like to do a live demonstration. It will be a quickie, and it will require a volunteer. And I know it might take some courage, because what I'm asking for is not someone to do a role play with me, but someone who's willing to bring up a real issue that they're facing right now, a real challenge or difficulty right now that you, whoever might consider volunteering, earnestly would like to feel healthier about, feel better about. So I would also ask that if there is a volunteer, that each one of us keep whatever you hear confidential. Certainly don't identify the name of the person. If it's an interesting demonstration, you want to tell others what you learned from it, by all means, but please in no way identify the person by name, by gender, by anything that would have anyone recognize who they are. And I say that so that whoever might volunteer might feel a little less uncomfortable about volunteering. So is there anyone, again, it'll just be a quickie, but willing to bring up a real issue or circumstance? I guess dogs are welcome too, but only if they speak English. I see dogs in the frame. And that was my attempt at humor, by the way. I see a few faces not at all smiling. And I unconditionally accept myself even when I attempt humor and it is not funny to people who hear it. Having said that, I'm just filling in time because no one has yet volunteered. Is there someone who'd be willing to volunteer?
I'll do it. Okay, that's okay. You can go ahead.
Oh, no, you could go.
Well, with that being said, I guess I will. I just recently experienced losing my son.
Oh, wait, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I think first I'm getting feedback, so it's hard to hear you. But also, could everyone else take their pictures off because I'm going to try and put them side by side, and then the person who's participating, will you turn your camera on?
Okay.
Yes. Thank you. And everyone else turn yours off, like Kimberly, and I'll turn, wait, let me turn mine off too. And then turn off yours off, and then I'm going to try and get it so just those two are on. So hold on.
May I have your name, please?
Off your video. Thank you. And
Okay.
so now it should be, I think just the two of you will show up as you are as you're talking. And then everyone else also mute yourselves also. I'm going to mute myself and go ahead, Dr. Debbie Joffe Ellis.
Okay. So our volunteer is,
Right here.
sorry, she's a therapist.
My name is Erica. I'm sorry.
You don't have to be sorry. I just would like to call you by name. Erica, thanks for volunteering. As I said, it's only going to be a bit of a quickie tonight.
Okay.
Thank you. What issue, what would you like to share for us to look at now?
Let's see. So I just lost my son recently, about 6 months ago. He was 23. So it was totally unexpected, and an issue that I have is that I don't know if I properly grieved him. Does that make sense?
It does make sense.
I'm sorry, I could barely hear you.
Oh, can you hear me now?
Yes, ma'am.
My heartfelt condolences. I think that is one of the most difficult things a person has to face, losing a child. So my heartfelt condolences. So Erica, can I first ask, what are you feeling right now?
Nervous. Yeah.
And what are you telling yourself to make yourself feel nervous?
I'm saying what I'm saying aloud what I couldn't say. I rushed myself right back into work and life. I buried him on Thursday and started a job as a therapist on Monday.
I'm going to go back to that. But just for us to first be in the here and now. And
Okay.
sorry, I'm seeing something in the chat room that I don't want to.
That's okay.
Okay. Erica, I asked what you were feeling, not about your issue. We're going to come to that. But
Okay.
right now, what are you feeling, Erica?
Nervous and shame.
Okay. First, what might you be thinking right now to make yourself feel nervous?
I think it's because I'm saying it aloud, what I've been holding in.
Right. No. Well, I think you're adding something to that, because if I was saying something aloud that I've been holding in,
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't necessarily feel nervous. But if I was telling myself, I'm saying something out loud, I've never heard myself say it before, and what if it's the wrong thing to say and people judge me or criticize me? That probably would make me nervous. Now, that's me. And I'm just wondering what you might be thinking, because the fact that you've never said it before, that's just a fact. And that alone won't make you nervous, probably. So what might you be adding to that?
What's making me feel nervous?
Are you worried about what people might be thinking of you?
No, I don't think I am nervous of what people are going to think of me. Maybe I was nervous that I shouldn't release my feelings.
So let's work with that. Why shouldn't you release your feelings?
Because I am strong.
That's why you shouldn't. So are you telling me that, and by the way, can you tell me what you mean by releasing your feelings?
I'm expressing them.
Okay. So are you telling me that strong people don't express their feelings?
Well, my belief or how I've been raised, it's not something that's done all the time.
Right.
Stays in his house. That's black folks.
Okay, somebody's talking.
They'll never hear.
Are you talking or?
No, someone else was talking. I'm sorry.
Hold on, I'm sorry. Kimberly, can you please turn off? Can you mute yourself? Sorry.
That's okay.
Thank you. Let's come back to now I don't see. I'd love to see Erica up close again, which I would.
So do I have to move to make it kind of, okay, let me move a little. Sorry.
Okay, so Erica, what you just revealed is where you got the idea that strong people don't release their feelings. That's how you learnt it. And, you know, when we're little, and that's what we learn because we see the adults in our lives, they're cute, you know, they're strong and they're not expressing, and that's what strong people do. And of course, at that time, you don't question it. And then, but I'm so grateful that now you're bringing that up, because where there's life, it's never too late. And you look very alive to me.
Thank you.
So I understand why till now you've believed strong people don't express their feelings. But can we look at that?
Yeah.
As you think about it, can you think of anyone who you consider strong, who you've actually seen express their feelings?
My grandmother.
But how can she be strong if she expressed her feelings, Erica? That sounds really wimpy to me.
I think I kind of stumbled in her room and seeing the expression of feelings. It wasn't out loud or, in front of others.
Okay, so she still restricted herself, but the point
Mhm.
you're looking at, the belief that you've got, the
Mhm.
should,
Yeah.
yeah. Now it sounds like you admire strength,
Mhm.
but let me also ask you this. Why must someone be strong all the time?
You're right. It's impossible to be strong all the time.
Well, I haven't met anyone. And is it bad to be vulnerable sometimes? That's a very important question. Is it
Mhm.
okay to not be strong at times?
It's okay.
So if I lost some of the people, and I have, the people who knew me the best and loved me the most, I mean, there are still some people alive who love me, but my parents, my husband, a few others who have died. Was it bad that I felt vulnerable and felt grief after they died and I told a friend or two? Was that bad that I was vulnerable and not acting strongly in that moment? Kimberly, you're back.
Oh, Lord.
Not at all.
And why isn't it bad? And thank you for being so open that you're letting the tears flow. That's wonderful. I think it's so good for you.
Thank you.
You don't have to thank me. So let's keep talking, shall we? So
Mhm.
if I shed tears after my loved one, I had a cousin who was like my little brother, and at the age of 23, he died when his car went into a tree. Now, for a while, I felt vulnerable and I didn't feel strong and I shed tears. Was that bad?
No,
Why not?
you did nothing wrong. You just expressed your current emotions and feelings. It probably was a relief.
And if I'm vulnerable like that sometimes, does it mean that I can't be strong at other times?
No, it doesn't dictate your future or who you are, define who you are.
Do you believe that?
Yeah, I do.
I believe that. And you're telling me that. Are you willing to consider that applies to you too?
Yeah.
So if you're willing to do that, and you think about the fact that right now you courageously are expressing your feelings, are you still feeling nervous about that?
No, I'm not. I'm a little settled. I guess that's why I'm starting to cry. I'm comfortable, at peace.
And you know what? You did that. You proved that just by changing your attitude, you can feel differently.
Mhm.
And that's, I could tell you things until you read this book, but you just proved to you and to me and anyone witnessing this very tender moment that just by noticing what we were telling ourselves and questioning that and accepting ourselves unconditionally, then in an instant, we change our feelings. You just did that. And by the way, if you're so in love with being strong, that takes a certain sort of strength too.
Yeah, it does.
And to be strong includes some vulnerability, and to be vulnerable can include some strength. So having said that, I invite you to think about, perhaps later, because I want to get back to talking about what you first brought up, but thinking about do you rigidly compartmentalize how you should feel? And if you've done that, does it serve you?
Correct. Because I've completely detached myself from it. And it's crazy because this is my job. I tell people in interaction all the time, let it go. It's okay. You know, it doesn't define you. But for some reason, I just never applied it to myself.
Well, I think you beautifully identified one of the reasons, because you were brought up to believe that strong women, strong people, don't express their feelings. I mean, even grandma, who you caught expressing her feeling, did it in a room, and you accidentally.
Yeah.
So you got the message. It's not okay for you. But I'm suspecting that something's changed now.
Yeah, most definitely so. I think I'm going to go ahead and cry a lot more, but it's okay. It's okay.
Is it okay, or is it good?
It's good. That few moments of just being able to say it and release myself gave me what I suspected it should give me, and that's a release to get it off my shoulders and think about it. So.
Yeah, and change your thinking. And you also said before, when I asked you what you're feeling, you said nervous and ashamed. Well, my hunch is that you now realize that there's no shame in being vulnerable and in tears, even if you are already a compassionate, brilliant therapist for others.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, healer, heal thyself.
That I felt that poke too. Thank you.
We're not finished yet.
Okay.
So, Erica, earlier you said to me that you think I'm trying to think of your exact words, but it was along the lines of, you're afraid you haven't grieved the way you should. Yeah. Okay, how should a person grieve?
I hate that word. Lord, I used it.
No, this is being recorded, so Michelle could send you the link, or I think it was.
Am I shooting all over myself? Okay, let me. I guess I feel that way because.
You think that way?
Well, I think that way because it stems back from when I got the call and got to the hospital, and he was gone already. Instead of hearing the words from the doctor, I left the room. And then at the funeral, instead of sitting, well, we had a viewing there like my husband did the whole time. I made myself busy and came in and out the room. I didn't take enough time to actually, well, I feel as though I think I didn't, to sit there and grieve.
You mean sit there and cry and look at the body?
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
You mean you didn't take, can you hear me now?
Yes, okay.
You mean you didn't take time to sit there and look at your boy's body? Is that what you're saying, that you should have done that more?
Mm-hmm. And maybe I could have grieved it and just kind of been in a better state. I didn't take.
Yeah. Prove to me that if you had taken that time, that you would have been in a better state.
I feel or think as though if I would have taken the time to sit there and process more.
Okay.
What was transpiring.
Okay. So if I had had a child and heaven forbid, he suddenly passed away, and I said to you, Kimberly, I'm going to go to the funeral, look at the body and sit there and really process this. What might you say to me?
what are you trying to achieve or get out of it? Or what do you feel as though it'll do for you?
And I might say to you, well, isn't that how I should be grieving?
And then I would say, well, let's not say should. Um,
Isn't that
it's
normal
not a
to grieve?
it's not a definition behind your own personal grief. Everybody does it in their own way.
Does that apply to you, Erica?
Pretty much so. I'm one of those everybody's, right?
I don't
In
know
my
what
own
you
way.
mean by that. Oh,
Well, yeah, in my own way. My own way, maybe that's what I needed to do the way I did it.
look, I could be wrong, but my impression is, number one, that you were in shock. Number two, that it would not be unusual for many mothers or fathers who unexpectedly or expectedly lost their child to just be in a fugue.
Yeah. Completely so.
Can you, in retrospect, give yourself permission to accept that what you did was what you did, and why judge it?
I think that, but for some reason, I haven't kind of let it go. My thought always comes across my mind and I defute it with what has happened has happened. And that's how you had to deal with it. Then that's how you had to deal with it. It's okay.
If I'd lost a child, no, if I had lost a child, would you have spoken to me in that time?
No, I wouldn't have. So I am tough on myself, huh?
You tell me.
It very much sounds like I am tough on myself.
Where is that setting you?
Sitting here, pondering now, and questioning myself, and shouldn't myself, or could I have, or probably should have, or yeah. And it's not a nice place sometimes.
I think, by the way, I think it's very good that you're sitting here questioning, but the other element of what you're just saying in a negative sense was that attitude causes you to be very harsh on yourself.
Mm-hmm.
In a way, I suspect you wouldn't be on people you loved or even who you didn't know, who just lost their heart and soul in a child, in a sense, their blood, their life.
Definitely wouldn't be to others.
Is there a different attitude that you can start adopting? And by the way, I just want to give a realistic context. I'm so grateful that you are willing to express what you are, and you are having some realizations or admissions, and it's going to be really important that you keep reminding yourself some of the newer, more compassionate, healthy attitudes, because you've had that tough attitude, how you should be, and strong people don't express, and I should grieve in a certain way, and I should have sat my ass on the chair and pondered things when he was, and so hard on yourself. I'm glad you're laughing, and I think it's up as well, and that's great.
Wow.
So your realization now, got to keep repeating it, because you've been thinking the tough stuff since you were a child, and it sounds like you had wisdom, and you've had wisdom for other people.
Yeah.
It's like, a person who loves dogs, and they go and feed the neighbor's dogs, and their dog is starving. And
that's what it sounds like.
Right. And you, from the moment I saw your face, you feel to me like a warm, loving, compassionate woman who, by the way, has experienced one of the toughest things a human being will experience, and not all do, losing a child, but and yet there you were with strength and vulnerability, you know, and the time has come to actively work, in my opinion, on unconditionally accepting and appreciating yourself as much as you easily do with and for others.
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
I think I should.
Therapist. That's interesting. She's a therapist. Time for she's a therapist to be her own
Own
therapist.
therapist.
Erica.
And because it's a crazy thought pattern that I have, and is random or had. Okay, let me not talk that into yes, that I have had randomly. But every day I am like implanting seeds of strength and motivation and instilling hope and to everyone else around me. And yeah, I found myself looking a little strange sometimes.
Well, what are your intentions now that we've had this conversation, Erica?
Applying a lot of theories to Erica.
Can I make a few suggestions?
Mm-hmm.
After I ask you, what are you feeling right now?
Mm-hmm. A little, well, I ain't gonna say a little, free. Free of thoughts that's not gonna help me. Validated that it's okay for me to be human. And I am not made of steel. It's okay.
And thank God for that.
Right. Because even that get old, right? And rust out if it's not properly cared for. So yes, I do.
Grief is filled with love for your son.
Mm-hmm.
And as you pointed out, different people grieve in different ways at different times.
Yes.
And people who think they should be like steel deprive their hearts of that tenderizing ache that's imbued with love.
Yeah.
So you're feeling free, and are you feeling nervous?
No.
And are you feeling ashamed?
No.
And it took you 20 minutes or less to change that.
And I wouldn't have done it in no better place but here. I'm glad I did.
We're not finished yet.
Oh no.
I'm glad you did too, for reasons I'll say in a few moments, but I'm just looking for something to show you here.
Okay.
Erica, can I make some suggestions?
Mm-hmm.
Would you be willing to write down all the stinking, shoulding thinking that you can identify in relation to how you should have grieved and anything else, and to dispute those ideas and to come up with healthy, compassionate, rational beliefs? Would you be willing to do that?
Yes. I'm starting already.
What's that?
I'm starting already.
Okay, that's homework number one.
Okay.
Number two, would you be willing to write those new beliefs down on index cards and repeat them every day, at least 50 times, reading them for the next 30 days or maybe 60 days?
Okay.
Are you willing and comfortable to do that?
Yes.
Do you like drawing?
Nah. I'm not a good drawer at all.
Okay.
I'll
That's the
attempt.
reason I was asking. But I
Mhm.
just want to make another suggestion, and if this doesn't feel it fits for you, don't worry about it.
Okay.
I've been working with a client who had, and I'm speaking past tense, abysmally low self-acceptance,
Mhm.
like she had to be perfect, and everyone around her had to be perfect. What do you think the result of that was emotionally for her?
A roller coaster.
Yeah, you got that right.
Draining.
Draining,
Angry.
rage, and
Angry. Just, didn't work out well.
so she did what I suggested you do. And then I asked her if she'd be willing to make a poster of some of the new rational beliefs and
Okay.
then put them on the wall where she could see the posters every day.
Okay.
And I just want to show you, this is one of the ones.
Okay.
And she wrote, I can stand what I don't like, I just don't like it. And it's a picture of her just holding her heart, being content. And she can
Okay.
So that's an example. And like she's got a whole wall of different posters. So you don't have to like drawing or even be good at it, but just
I can manage the first picture. I think I could do that.
you don't have to copy that picture. It's your picture.
Yeah, I know, but I'm
You
just
know what I
saying
mean?
her drawing.
Yeah, yeah. And I have one other suggestion.
Mhm.
Would you be willing to do something nurturing just for Erica every single day?
Okay.
I have another suggestion. They don't stop. Do you have a gratitude journal?
No.
Would you be willing to buy a book that's just for you and every day write down, even on the days that you've cried and you're grieving or you're feeling you had a good day and you're tranquil, whatever, every day, easy or hard, that you write down what you're grateful for.
Mhm.
So I've given you a lot of homework.
Yes.
Do you think it's hard or too hard?
No, I think it'd be very beneficial.
Oh, I am convinced it will be beneficial if you do it.
Mhm.
And are you willing to do it?
Yes.
And I just want to revisit. Did you do something wrong, bad, pathetic, weak by just going into automatic after your son died and not doing the things you half an hour ago told me you should have done to grieve properly?
No, I don't feel as though I did.
Is what you did not only okay, but really, really, really okay?
It is. It's okay. It's really okay.
Yeah. What are you feeling right now?
I'm feeling relief.
And your emotion?
I'm not. My mood, my emotions. I'm not sad or doubtful.
That isn't bad, but what you tell me sounds a lot better than shame and nervousness.
Yeah.
I think some profound things have come up today, and I thank you again. My greatest wish is that you run with what came up today and just nourish yourself with unconditional self-acceptance. I also thank you because I think this has been really helpful for other people to witness.
Mhm.
I urge you to be as kind and kinder to yourself as you are with others, and not believe the irrational beliefs that you incorporated early on because you were too young to think, is this right or wrong?
Right.
Okay.
Thank
Do you
you.
have any final comments, or do you have any questions for me, Erica?
No, actually, I was asking about an exercise that you had mentioned, but you gave it to us. So I printed it off while we were in session. So I am going to research and try to use more techniques to help my patients.
Healer, heal thyself.
I am taking it to heart.
Yes. Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much, Erica. Thank
No
you.
problem. Thank you, guys.
Okay, so let's come back, everyone.
Let me close myself out.
Oh, Dr. Joffe Ellis, we have about 12 minutes left. I didn't know if you want to wrap up and answer some questions. Really, the only question that was in the chat was about gratitude lessons. How do you do the gratitude every day? So that was the only question that I had posted, although I'm sure if you open it up to questions, people will have other ones. So.
Yeah. Thank you, Steph. So just a quick answer, how do you open up to gratitude? Just consider the things that are positive and good in your life. Now I've lost, I'm seeing a weird screen again. Okay, now we're back, great. And one can either just do it in one's mind every day or write it down in a journal. I don't know if that's what you meant by the question, how, either writing or in your head. I recommend if it's a new daily activity for the first few months, do it in writing. Some people do it continuing in writing, and you don't have to be creative. It's not about something different every day. It's about thinking, I am so grateful for this, this, and this. And really, if we're willing, even if we're going through a hell of a time, if we're alive, any of you who are able to listen to this, it indicates that you're cognitively able. And however bad, and some things, and we just saw what Erica went through, are so very difficult. But where there's life, there's hope that we can still have a meaningful life, that the memories of those we've lost can be inspirational and blessings, and still be a loving energy that fills our heart. Yeah, we're deprived of them for the rest of our life, but guess what? We're all going to go at some point. And so gratitude allows us to grieve when there's grief, and also, at least I can see, at least I can hear, I can look at the sky, I can look at flowers and just focus on what still is good. So that's all I'll say for now about gratitude. Forgive me.
I want to take a couple, there was a couple other questions people just posted. Do you want to take those, or do you need to move on to something else?
I'm going to be audacious and ask, do you think it would be fine to do another one of these where I can go into the material I didn't go into, like tools and techniques and pivotal elements? In which case, I would love to use the rest of our time for questions.
Sure, you'd like to do another workshop sometime soon? Yeah, we could arrange that. Yeah.
Part two.
Yeah.
And hopefully the people present here would be willing to do that.
Okay.
But anyway, I only bring that up because I can either speed through what I was going to still say or answer the questions. So
I think they're you can do them kind of quickly, and then we won't do any more questions, and you could wrap up. This one I think you'll be able to do quickly. What happens when a client comes up with new effective philosophies, but they don't really believe them? Is there a technique or advice you have for that?
yes, and this happens commonly. People say, well, I agree with it here, but I don't feel it here in my heart or in my gut. Repetition, repetition, repetition. It takes more than one awareness to change something you've believed for years and years and years. You know, there's the sign, there's a joke in New York City, which is full of musicians, and you've really made it if you perform in Carnegie Hall. And so there's a story of a tourist that goes up to someone, a New Yorker who happens to be a musician, and says, how do I get to Carnegie Hall? And the tourist wants to see the lovely hall. And the musician says, the way you get to Carnegie Hall is practice, practice, practice. And so it is with REBT. And by the way, interestingly, I don't live far from there, and I walked past there the other week, and no concerts because of COVID. And there's a big sign up outside Carnegie Hall saying, how do you get to Carnegie Hall? Patience, patience, patience. So repetition, repetition, not shoulding, not needing to feel instantly better. And neuroplasticity, repetition over time, the new habitual way of thinking will become solidified.
Okay, great. And then this one, I think this is from Dr. Pedigo, who does a lot on meditation and mindfulness and things like that. And he asked if you've mentioned gratitude. Have you ever recommended mindfulness? Does mindfulness and REBT go together?
Yes, in a number of ways. Of course, mindfulness is a broad term. There's the mindfulness that's just being present in the moment, that's being a witness. Other people consider thinking about one's thinking or watching one's thoughts another form of mindfulness. So it depends on the definition. But what I think could come under the mindfulness banner that certainly is a part of REBT is to be aware of what one is thinking without judgment, just in terms of judging oneself for thinking it, can assess whether it's rational or irrational. So being aware of one's thoughts, thinking about one's thinking, having a goal, you know, to experience a healthy state of being, which implies devoid of the unhealthy emotions. Mindfulness doesn't mean you don't feel healthy emotions, according to REBT and me and Albert Ellis. Another thing that comes under mindfulness, and one of the tools is meditation. And REBT would embrace recommending meditation to some people. Now, that would be considered in REBT an inelegant solution. And I haven't had time to describe to you the difference between elegant and inelegant techniques and what the techniques are. The reason is I was so grateful for Erica bringing up that topic, and I, in fact, didn't want to stick to the time I thought I would give for the demonstration. And I think it's been so valuable. And I thank you again, Erica. I'm not seeing your image now, but I think you're listening there. She's a therapist. Yes, she is. And now she's going to be her own best therapist as well. So that's why I'm sorry I haven't had time for that. But in answering this question, an elegant solution in REBT is getting to the root cause of the unhealthy emotions, which primarily is chercher le should, look for the should, the must, the ought, dispute and replace. So that's elegant because it's getting to the root cause. An inelegant technique to help a person usually helps them short term, and it usually doesn't get to the root cause. So meditation might be very good, inelegant, according to REBT terms, solution. It calms a person down. They meditate every day. They feel less anxious and all, but it doesn't get to the root cause of the anxiety. So in conclusion, I love that question. REBT, I think, is one of the original mindfulness psychotherapies, encouraging awareness, that with awareness we have choice, think about our thinking, and yeah, practice activities that still and calm the mind. But again, they might just have short-term benefit, long-term benefit, root out the shoulds and zap them and replace them.
Thank you. So if you don't mind, I've gotten messages from people that they've really enjoyed your presentation, but I know we're running out of time. So if you just want to wrap up, and then hopefully we will schedule you for another workshop before the end of this semester or in the summer, whatever works for your schedule.
That would be lovely. And look, I'll recommend any of Albert Ellis's books. And if you want a primer, John Carlson invited me and the late John Carlson, who many of you know, invited Al and I to do a book on REBT for the APA. And I, a couple of years ago, did the second edition, and it's updated. And so this is a primer. And what I haven't had a chance to tell you is in the book. And what I haven't had a chance to tell you, the specific tools and techniques. You saw some that I used, by the way, with Erica, just clarifying the goal. How can I help? Looking for the irrational beliefs, showing genuine empathy, and boy, is it genuine, and giving homework. We did a little bit of a reverse role play, even though it wasn't clinical, but Erica, what would you have told me? So that was kind of, so anyway, what I haven't shared with you that I invite you to read about, even if we do another workshop or if we don't do another workshop, because I hope we do, but the tools and techniques and the pivotal elements of an REBT session, which again, thanks to Erica, I think you saw. You can read about the history and development of REBT as well. But one of the unique things about REBT that I will say now in our final minutes, it's unusual in that it wasn't just created from a theory or a hypothesis around which research was done and so a theory was born. There was that, but it largely was contributed to by the way Albert Ellis, from childhood on, coped with many challenges, physical and emotional. And he was a genius in finding ways to overcome them. And those ways became tools and techniques in REBT. So that's very unique. So how I would like to finish, the way I'd like to finish is to express how grateful I am to you, Dr. Durmer, and Michelle, and all of you who are present, to you, Erica, for being such a strong and vulnerable, magnificent piece of human being. And I think many, if not all of us, are enriched by what you brought. And I urge each of you, if you're not already, and some of you may be, to just monitor what you're feeling. And if it's not life enhancing, if it's not healthy, then cherchez le should. That's French for look for the should. Think about your thinking. Healer, heal thyself. Life goes so quickly and it is short. Hopefully some of us will live to a very old age and die when we're old and healthy, meaning we haven't suffered for long, but we don't know. What we know is what's here and now. And the choice we have to think in healthy ways, to create healthy emotions, to experience awe and wonder and gratitude every single day, no matter how dire the circumstances may concurrently be. And just make a choice to, as much as possible, enjoy life. When you do that, non-verbally, you radiate well-being and help other people, whether you're doing therapy with them or not. And I thank you. I send you love and gratitude.
Thank you so much, everyone. The books she held up, those APA series, they are great books. They're so comprehensive and easy to read. So I highly suggest them. You can get them easily. You can get them through Amazon. And if you ever get a chance to see Dr. Joffe Ellis in person, I suggest you do. She's great over Zoom, but there's an energy when you're in the room with her that is also very compelling. So thank you again. And you're getting in the chats. I don't know if you can see it. Lots of thank yous and appreciation. A phenomenal session, as they're saying on there. And so hopefully, yes, we'll bring you back out. We'll talk, we'll email and get your schedule and see when we can fit you in for a part 2. So thank you very much.
Be safe and well and healthy and joyful, everyone. Thank you.
Thanks, Michelle, as always.
No problem. Have a good weekend, everyone.
Thanks. Oh, look who woke up right at the end of the workshop.
Have a good one. I'm going to end it, and then I'll send the deets. I'll send the recording. I'll send the chat, and we'll go from there. It probably won't be till tomorrow, though, because it takes a little while for it to download. So just so you know.
No problem. Thank you so much. Have a good night.
You're welcome. Okay, bye.